Every person who has ever read Robert Greene wanted the same thing. They wanted the edge, the advantage, the specific, practical, historically proven knowledge of how power actually works, not the sanitized version taught in schools, or the optimistic version sold by motivational speakers, but the real version. The version that explains why some people consistently win and others consistently lose. Why certain individuals seem to move through the world with an ease and a force that others cannot replicate no matter how hard they try. Why the rules that are officially in effect in any room are never the rules that are actually in effect. They read the 48 Laws of Power, and they felt for the first time like someone was telling them the truth. And most of them missed the entire point of the book. Not because they read it wrong, because they read it the way we read everything we want, selectively, hungrily, extracting what confirms what we already believe and skipping past what challenges it. They absorbed the strategies. They underlined the laws. They dog-eared the pages about never outshining the master and always saying less than necessary and making other people come to you. What they did not read, what is sitting in the same pages waiting in the historical examples that Greene chose with enormous care, is the warning. Robert Greene spent more than 20 years studying the most powerful people in human history. Kings and generals and seducers and artists and strategists and revolutionaries. People who moved entire civilizations, who bent the will of millions, who achieved everything that the culture defines as success and power and mastery. And the thing he found, again and again, in case after case across centuries and cultures and completely different categories of power, was not the story of triumph. It was the story of destruction, of people who climbed all the way to the top of the thing they had spent their lives pursuing and were consumed by it when they arrived. The warning is in every chapter. Almost nobody reads it. Before we talk about what Greene found, we need to understand what he was actually doing. Robert Greene is not a self-help author. He is not a motivational speaker with a historical veneer. He is, at his core, a student of human nature. Someone who became obsessed, early in his life, with the gap between how human beings present themselves and how they actually operate, between the official story of why people do what they do and the real story, between the face that power wears in public and what it looks like from the inside. His method is obsessive historical research. For each book, he reads hundreds of primary sources, letters, diaries, court records, first-hand accounts, looking for the specific, unguarded moments when the masks of powerful people slip and the actual mechanics of their psychology become visible. The moments when Caesar is not performing for the historians, when Napoleon's letters to Josephine reveal something his military dispatches never would, when the great seducer's private notebooks show the specific fears that drove the conquests. What he is building, across all of his books, is not a manual. It is a map of human nature in its full complexity, the drives and fears and blind spots and hungers that operate in every person, regardless of their era or culture or level of achievement. A map drawn from the most extreme cases, because extreme cases reveal what ordinary life keeps hidden. And what that map shows, what it shows with a consistency that Greene himself has become more explicit about with each successive book, is that the external game of power is ultimately a reflection of the internal game. That what happens to you in the world of power is determined, far more than most people want to accept, by what is happening inside you, by what you know about yourself and what you refuse to know, by what you have faced in your own psychology and what you are still avoiding. The strategies in the 48 Laws are real. They work, but they work the way a sharp knife works, with a precision and a danger that is directly proportional to the steadiness of the hand holding it. In the hands of someone who knows themselves, who understands their own weaknesses and has done the work of examining their own blind spots and fears, the strategies are powerful tools. In the hands of someone who has skipped that work, who has gone directly to the laws without first mastering the territory they operate from, they are something else entirely. They are the mechanism of the destruction that fills Greene's pages. Open the 48 Laws of Power to almost any page and read the historical example carefully. Not the law at the top, not the summary at the bottom, but the full story of the person Greene is using to illustrate it. What you find over and over is this: the person who fell victim to the law did not fall because they were stupid or naive or uninformed. They fell because of something specific in their own psychology, a need they could not see, a fear they could not acknowledge, a blind spot that was invisible to them precisely because it was theirs. Consider Nicolas Fouquet, the finance minister of Louis XIV, one of the most capable administrators in French history, a man of genuine talent and genuine power. In 1661, he threw a party at his chateau of Vaux-le-Vicomte that was so magnificent, so overwhelming in its display of wealth and taste, that it made the king's own residences look modest by comparison. 3 weeks later, Fouquet was arrested. He spent the rest of his life in prison. The law Fouquet violated is clear: never outshine the master. Greene uses the story to illustrate it. But the deeper question is why a man intelligent enough to reach the highest levels of the French court made a mistake that any reasonably attentive observer could have predicted. The answer is not ignorance of the rule. Fouquet knew the rule. The answer is a need for recognition, for the validation of his taste and his achievement, so powerful that it overrode everything he knew about the danger of satisfying it. The need was not examined. The need won. The general who trusted the wrong ally did not do so from a lack of strategic intelligence. He did so because his loneliness and his desire for connection overrode his judgment in the specific moment when judgment was required. The revolutionary who became the tyrant he had overthrown did not make that transformation from cynicism. He made it because the fear of losing power, a fear he had never examined, never named, never understood as the primary driver of decisions he attributed to principle, gradually consumed the principles themselves. The pattern is precise, and it repeats without exception. The external failure is always preceded by an internal one. The defeat in the world is always the delayed consequence of something unexamined in the self. Greene calls this in various places the primary law, the law that underlies all the others, and that makes them either useful or dangerous, depending on whether the person applying them has done a particular kind of work first. Know yourself. Not in the shallow sense of knowing your preferences and your strengths, in the deep sense of knowing your weaknesses, your compulsions, your fears, your specific patterns of self-destruction. Knowing which emotional needs are so strong that they will override your strategic intelligence at exactly the moment when you can least afford it. Knowing which situations trigger in you a kind of blindness that you cannot see from the inside because you are inside it. This is the work that most readers of Greene skip entirely, and it is the work that determines everything. Think about the people in your own life who have achieved significant external success, who have accumulated power, status, resources, the markers of winning the game. Now think about how many of them are genuinely at peace. How many of them have what they worked for and find it sufficient? How many of them are not at some level still running, still acquiring, still defending, still positioning, still unable to rest in what they have achieved because the hunger that drove them to achieve it did not dissolve when they arrived? Greene has spent his career studying exactly this population at historical scale, and what he has found is that the people who acquire power without first examining the psychology that drove them to seek it are not liberated by the acquisition. They are intensified by it. The fear of irrelevance that drove them to accumulate status does not go away when the status is achieved. It becomes more acute because now there is more to lose. The need for control that made them effective strategists does not relax when they reach a position of genuine control. It expands because the territory of what must be controlled has grown. The hunger for recognition that made them relentlessly competitive does not transform into satisfaction when the recognition arrives. It becomes a dependency, and dependencies are never satisfied. They are only temporarily quieted before they demand more. This is the dark side of mastery that Greene describes, and that almost nobody who reads him for the strategies wants to sit with. The acquisition of external power without the corresponding development of internal self-knowledge does not produce the peace that the acquisition was supposed to deliver. It produces a more elaborate version of the original problem, now dressed in the costume of success. Consider the Roman emperor who conquers the known world. The campaign required extraordinary self-discipline, strategic brilliance, the capacity to inspire loyalty in hundreds of thousands of soldiers across decades of brutal warfare. By any external measure, this is a person of exceptional capability. And yet, Greene documents this pattern across multiple emperors, multiple dynasties, multiple civilizations. The palace that is built at the summit of the conquest becomes a prison. The paranoia that was a useful tool on the battlefield, keeping the general alert to betrayal, does not shut off when the battles end. It turns inward. It consumes the court. It eliminates one by one every person capable of honest counsel, until the most powerful man in the world is surrounded entirely by people whose survival depends on telling him what he wants to hear. The fear that drove the conquest destroys the conquered territory. Consider the seducer who masters every technique of attraction: the mirroring, the strategic withdrawal, the calibrated mystery. The techniques work. They work repeatedly, across person after person, producing the conquests that were the goal. And then, late, the seducer discovers something that Greene documents in his studies of the great historical seducers who left accounts of their inner lives. The techniques have replaced the capacity for genuine connection rather than enabling it. Every real moment of vulnerability was a strategic calculation for so long that the difference between strategic and genuine has been lost. The seducer is alone in a way that none of the conquests addressed, because none of the conquests were ever about connection. They were about the fear of not being chosen, and that fear, unexamined, was never resolved by being chosen. It was only temporarily quieted. The pattern is not accidental, it is structural. And Greene, if you read him carefully rather than selectively, is explicit about why. In 2012, Greene published Mastery, his fifth book and, in his own description, the one that contains what all the others were leading toward. The shift in mastery is significant. The 48 laws are still present implicitly in the strategies that masters use in navigating the social and political worlds they inhabit. But the center of gravity has moved. The book is not primarily about power over others. It is about power over the self. The specific, demanding, lifelong process of developing a deep relationship with your own nature, your own strengths, your own way of seeing, that produces what Greene calls mastery, the condition in which you are operating from the deepest and most authentic version of what you actually are. The masters in the book, Darwin, Mozart, Leonardo, Einstein, are not primarily characterized by their strategic intelligence or their ability to navigate the power games of their environments. They are characterized by something prior to and more fundamental than strategy: an unusual degree of self-knowledge, of attention to their own inner life, of willingness to confront what they actually are rather than what they wish they were or what others require them to be. Darwin spent years observing nature with a quality of attention that required the prior development of a quality of self-attention. He knew his own patterns of thought well enough to recognize when he was rationalizing and when he was actually following the evidence. He knew his own fears well enough to understand why the implications of his theory terrified him. The social consequences, the religious opposition, the certainty of being misunderstood, and to continue developing it despite the terror. The self-knowledge did not make the work easier, it made the work possible. Leonardo kept notebooks not just of his observations of the external world, but of his observations of his own mind, its methods, its biases, its specific ways of arriving at understanding. He documented not just what he saw, but how he saw. The particular angles of approach that his mind naturally took, the specific questions that his curiosity always circled back to regardless of the subject. The external mastery was built on a foundation of internal cartography. He knew the instrument he was working with. He knew its capabilities and its limitations with a precision that allowed him to extend both. Einstein, in his later autobiographical accounts, described the central work of his scientific life not as mathematical calculation, but as a kind of disciplined self-observation, the careful attention to the images and feelings and intuitions that preceded the formal mathematics, the willingness to follow a thought that felt right before he could prove it was right, the trust in his own cognitive processes that came from having studied those processes with the same rigor he applied to physics. He knew how his mind worked. He knew what it needed. He knew when it was genuinely seeing and when it was pattern matching to what he already believed. That distinction, available only to someone who has studied their own thinking honestly, was the difference between his work and the work of people who were, by conventional measures, his intellectual equals. This is what Greene arrived at after 20 years of studying power. Not the laws, not the strategies. The recognition that the people who used power without destroying themselves and others were people who had done a specific kind of internal work first, who knew themselves with an honesty and a precision that most people find too uncomfortable to sustain, and that the people who were destroyed by power, who fill the cautionary sections of every chapter in the 48 Laws, were almost always destroyed not by their enemies, but by the specific aspects of themselves they had never examined. So what is the actual warning that Robert Greene spent 20 years embedding in his books, and that almost nobody who reads them for the strategies ever extracts? It is not complicated. It does not require a new framework or a new vocabulary. It is, in fact, the oldest instruction in the history of human thought, the one carved above the entrance to the oracle at Delphi, the one that Socrates made the center of his entire philosophical practice, the one that Jung spent 50 years developing the clinical tools to pursue. Know yourself. Know what you actually want and why you want it. Not the socially acceptable version of your desires, but the real version, including the parts that are not flattering. Know what you are afraid of and how that fear shapes your decisions in ways that you would prefer to attribute to rational calculation. Know which of your apparent strengths are compensations for weaknesses you have not yet acknowledged. Know which of the people in your life are mirrors for aspects of yourself that you have not yet been willing to see directly. Know, specifically, what will override your strategic intelligence at the worst possible moment, because something will. Every person has a specific vulnerability, a specific kind of situation that activates a specific kind of blindness. The question is not whether this is true of you. It is whether you know what it is before it becomes expensive to find out. This is the work that precedes everything else in Greene's world. The work that makes the strategies useful rather than dangerous. The work that separates the people in his books who achieved power and kept it, who used it to build something real, to create something lasting, to become something more than what they started as, from the people who achieved power and were consumed by it. The 48 Laws are a map of the territory, but a map is only as useful as the clarity of the person reading it. If you do not know where you are standing, if you do not know your own position in the landscape with honesty and precision, the map will take you somewhere. It will not take you where you think you are going. Robert Greene spent 20 years trying to tell you this. It is in every chapter. It is in every cautionary tale. It is in the entire architecture of mastery, which is not a book about how to become famous or powerful, but about how to become genuinely yourself, which turns out, in Greene's analysis, to be the only foundation on which anything real can be built. Most people read the laws and skip the warning. The warning is the whole point.